So this is a nice sort of transition into my talk, which is about citizen participation and GIS use in urban India. My other body of research is actually on community engaged mapping and public participation GIS. So this is a different project which looks at how GIS implementation is ongoing in India and exactly what types of citizen participation is happening as a result. It's not connected to the secondary cities project, but I think it has some contributions to it. First we have to start with understanding the nature of exercising citizenship in India. So the issues here is that much of the new modes of GIS use are aimed at increasing citizen participation, but the nature of citizen participation is a very important process within it. And what we find in India is that there's very high levels of inequalities in exercising citizenship rights. And traditionally, there has been very closed spaces of citizenship practice where participation was quite difficult, especially for population that were marginalized in terms of income or caste or other reasons. And part of the issues has been that there has been little accountability from state agencies. It's dominated also by powerful political elites, and so access to basic goods and rights is not always easy. And there is a lack of both vertical accountability and horizontal accountability. And as a result, the system has been manipulated by elites who use patronage, corruption, and who stifle dissent to really control the citizens and affect their participation. So what is interesting is that in recent years, a new amendment to the Constitution happened, which granted actually for the first time new opportunities for citizen participation. So that's really a positive news, including also Right to Information Act. Another interesting model has been implementation of a new governance model. So the transition from government to governance, which has its various complexities anyways, and the entry of public-private partnership. And a huge array of initiatives have been developed, e-governance, GIS mapping and use, which aimed to have invited spaces of citizen participation, which is a completely new phenomenon. At the same time, the goal was municipal reform and modernization. And a big part of that was streamlining service delivery. So I was pretty thrilled with all these goals. And what is also exciting is that there's been a lot of work being done in the GIS sector. Now, India has always had a big, rich history of mapping, and I'm not even going to go through the history, but just the Western cartography and surveying was introduced in 18th century. And as a result, unlike perhaps some developing countries when India gained its independence, it actually had a very well-established survey of India which had conducted detailed land surveys and topographic maps. However, one of the first things is that the topo maps were never available to citizens. When I was a geography student in the university, I had to have special permission to get access to topographic maps for research. And that means something in terms of local level spatial knowledge. 1947 onwards, which is when independence happened, other mapping efforts came into, such as the establishment of National Atlas and Thematic Mapping Organization, which is a very important thing because they produce thematic maps at national, state, district level in vernacular languages. Again, India has 24 major languages, not counting the minors. So the production of maps in vernacular languages was very important. However, no city maps. Okay? So after that, more developments, especially Indian Space Research Organization, and from 1980s, experimentations with GIS, as well as first satellite. 1990s, GIS was being approached more seriously and also at district and state scales. But really from 2000 onwards, things took off and a whole range of initiatives happened. Particularly interesting is that there is now a national GIS concept where the goal is GIS content development for governance and citizen empowerment, and that's a direct quote. And a national GIS visioning program has been implemented through a 5-year plan. And a state GIS definition has been launched with following the model of one particular state, Karnataka, where Bangalore is located, saying Vision of Karnataka GIS. So we do see GIS development from national to local scale. There's also been all sorts of GIS spatial portals developed that provide access to maps to everybody for the first time. In all of this, I wanted to mention some key national actors. National GIS, National Informatics Center, which has produced its own portal, Bharat Maps. ISRO with its Bhuvan Maps, and also Census of India. So we see a huge range of initiatives happening at national level and pretty impressive work. Simultaneously, another program was launched, which JNN URM program, which really focused on advocacy for municipal reforms, and it created new spaces of citizenship practice. So this is National GIS with very ambitious goals, and including creating a platform with GIS-centric computing and networking infrastructure with seamless, mapping at 1:10,000 scale, as well as city-level data at larger scales. So, however, at the municipal level, things are still obviously under construction, and some of the things have happened well, and some are still ongoing. So I'm going to go into the Bhuvan site a bit. Bhuvan means earth, and this is a huge repository of data. And so for the first time, since within India, the concern about national security always actually prevented access to maps, detailed local level maps to people. So finally, everybody has access to maps. That's pretty remarkable. And another one is National Informatics Center's Bharat Maps. Pretty incredible work. And Bharat Maps has, again, very ambitious goals with 23 data layers. And it's definitely geared towards e-governance, okay? This is the driving mission between e-governance and increasing citizen participation and reforming municipalities, and really implementing supposedly sustainable urban reforms and urban governance. It has a huge list of goals, and I just put it out so you can get a sense of what it is doing. But it was launched nationwide at all the major urban bodies. Okay, and as part of it, National Urban Information Systems was created. And this is another very important initiative because it's a comprehensive information systems for urban local bodies for planning, management, and decentralized governance. So this is a big goal, and NUIS directly sees the linkage between GIS and participation and governance. The goal is to map 5,000 plus urban centers. And the geography is very important here because from ward level, this is the scale, the local, the micro scale to the city level. So detailed mapping. And basically throughout India's history of mapping and so on, such detailed local level mapping has never been done. And also as a result, culturally, average Indians, they're used to seeing maps at different scales, but never at a local level scale. So this is the other contradiction, that we have to pay attention to that part of the mapping culture, is this unfamiliarity with local level maps and getting used to the fact that these maps exist and how to read them and how to use them, right? In governance especially. So as far as urban land bodies, there's 41 urban land bodies per census of 2011. So that's a huge level of mapping at the local scale. A couple of examples that I just drew from Bhuvan. Here's Amritsar in Punjab, having pretty detailed mapping going on. Darbhanga in Bihar, which is a small, well, in our vocabulary or in our definition, a small town. To see a Darbhanga being represented here was impressive to me. Jamnagar, Gujarat, another, these would all fall as secondary cities in India. And also there's been a lot of this monitoring of urban growth. So I heard about this discussion integrating remote sensing, et cetera. So that's really going on here, particularly to understand how urban growth is taking place and studying it. And also really studying integrating the census data with it to study poverty with resulting growth and poverty patterns and hotspots and things like that. So Census of India is a major player in all of this. And so there's all these integration of census and satellite images and stuff like that. So within all of this context, there's the e-governance goal. And what really do they mean with that? Goal is to create transparent government at the local level. Now that's ambitious, okay? So what did it involve? One of the goals was efficient revenue collection. This is because tax collection has been quite poor in India. And that was definitely a goal to increase and modernize and make it efficient, mechanism for tax collection, property tax. But the other goals were websites with administrative information, e-forms for citizens to report dissatisfactions with service provision or other observations. Also the creation of control rooms to speak directly and register complaints. Okay, so all of these may not sound much to an American audience, but this is revolutionary in the Indian context where citizens had no voice to express any kind of complaint about the lack of service. So here's some examples. This is the Karnataka property tax form site. This is the Hyderabad property tax module, which has a whole bunch of goals and is directly linked with maps. And it can also facilitate, the mapping works both ways. It can help in the administration to identify assessed and unassessed structures. But what are the limitations? In examining the actual use of all of this, what we find is that these are heavily used by administrators, and it really facilitates their work and tax collection and efficiency and so on, but it's less used by citizens. And the reason is not clear. Is it due to digital divide? Is it because they're unused to maps? Another thing I feel is a serious issue is that the interface is in English, and even the Karnataka one, and the local languages are not used. This automatically excludes all non-English speakers, and that's a big part of the population. And English is really a foreign language. Websites are also not well publicized. Many people are unaware. Users are primarily well-educated middle class, but the poor class people are not part of this e-governance. I also found that website maintenance to be a huge problem, so that it wasn't always available for use, and I would check periodically various websites. So it was pretty erratic at times, and I wondered how that affected its functionality in India. Now, what is also interesting is that the citizens really liked having access to control rooms, and they liked the ability to directly contact somebody, talk, and register a complaint and have a number to pursue and go on from there. And it definitely eliminated the usual long lines in offices, which are a bane to every Indian citizen, where your file gets pushed from desk to desk. There are some other interesting things happening, such as crime mapping, GIS for Chennai City Police. I was pretty surprised by that, and I'm not sure to what extent they're doing it and what the impacts are on the crime analysis, but apparently this is ongoing. There is also a private grievance module via e-governance. It helps the public to register a complaint online on roads, streetlights, dumper bins, and all sorts of things. And people, it's actually connected to a map. But there's also a citizen, there's also a control room with direct lines. And so we have this really nice public grievance module here. I think the system looks really nice. And the mapping component to it is a very good application. And there's also a central, a form like this. So it's at various levels of governance, at central level or at local governance and so on. So it's really addressed the different scales of government agencies and your ability to register complaints. But again, our findings show that there is low use of e-based public grievance module and greater use of control rooms. And it's interesting that there's an improvement in service delivery, such as what are called petty complaints type A, which are a lot of, fix this, this didn't happen, do the stuff, which have been done, which are being responded to efficiently. But problems requiring larger, time, that you have to pay attention to it, that you have to invest resource, you have to invest labor, the structural issues, those are obviously the very important complaints, and many times it's poor people are more pursuing those complaints. And those are not being addressed, okay? And another interesting thing is that the mode of participation. These modes are highly individualized. Now, marginalized communities tend not to pursue individualized complaints because of their marginalized status, their lack of social power, political power. And they tend to take their grievances as a community to ward leader, to community organization, to local NGO, or to the local legislative assembly member. So this system is an individualized system that is more catered towards the middle class, the educated, who also know how to navigate administration and pursue complaints. So there is an inbuilt inequity in these spaces of citizenship. But really the major issue is lack of government accountability. And again, we have to address those. So no amount of online GIS or anything else will fix that. And power positions are very strongly entrenched. And really, if government workers refuse to do things, there is nothing a citizen can do. So, the success of all this is that it has facilitated internal administration a lot and is being used by government employees, but as to how much it can really empower citizens is questionable. But it has done all of this. It has made mapping widely available, which is a huge thing. The people are for the first time able to access maps, use them. There's a surge in research regarding urban, at the urban scale, which was difficult. And there's also new spaces of citizen participation that's going on through Public Participation GIS, community action planning. So there's a lot going on. And I'm just going to show some examples of that. Here's Transparent Chennai, which is a nonprofit action research think tank. They've developed an interactive mapping system where they've used, they actually had a funding from Google, and they used Google Maps with thematic layers. And the goal is to improve government accountability and to empower residents to take actions. So it actually has a really good interactive mapping system through which you can not only use it to further your, register issues and pursue actions, but you can also add to the knowledge. So it's crowdsourced knowledge building. And they're also very engaged in actually doing research with it all. So it's not just just mapping, but pursuing action-based research. And this is getting quite heavily used by many NGOs and activists, and also middle-class civil society. And of course, there's the issue of digital divide and language issue again, which kind of excludes the poor people, but the NGOs are using these to work with the poor people. And so this is one of the maps where they're pursuing, garbage cleanup issues. So many other such things examples are there. I thought this was a very interesting project. It's called Hamara Bachpan. Hamara Bachpan means, in Hindi, it means our childhood. And this was this NGO worked with the children of a slum to do mapping, okay? And they're mapping their environment. They're also mapping their emotional responses. And that sort of emotional response mapping, I believe some scholars have brought it up, is really important, especially in understanding issues of safety and what should be done. So this is part of a civic campaign centered on child clubs, where children are creating detailed social maps to voice their concerns about public space. Again, I mean, this is I also am very interested in these kinds of projects elsewhere, and there's so many goals it achieves. Number one, it achieves this advocacy and community action mapping, really. But also children get to participate, and they get to build maps, and there's a whole educational component behind it. So it's very, very rich. And so here we see, to me, these are really quite impressively well-drawn maps. I wouldn't have thought these were children maps, but they're also mapping slums, which are very poorly understood. And usually local municipality groups don't have much access to the spatial data at the slum level because many are illegal constructions and they would not probably even let you come in and map them. But the children who live there are doing it and producing very detailed maps. And in this example, they used it to display their concerns about safety of certain areas. They're filling in a whole bunch of details, and they're saying where there could become play spaces, where trash bins could be added. So they're drawing not only the detail level of their, what is here now, but what it could be, right? What actions, how it could be changed for the better. So I thought this was a very impressive level of mapping that they're doing. I also wanted to draw your attention to an older study, which in 2005, these scholars did it in New Delhi in a slum. Where it's very much a public participation GIS project, where again, as part of this rapid urban growth, many squatter settlements have taken place. They lack many times the basic services, and they also have limited access to water, for instance. There is a law that everybody must have access to water as a basic right. But essentially, the level of access they had to water was highly limited. And there's also the local agencies also lack information about the squatter settlements due to the illegal nature. So it's a two-sided problem. So Delhi Jal Board is the water board. They were a partner in this project. And National Institute for Urban Affairs and the stakeholders and the community. The new Sanjay Amar colony was the colony that was working with in this group. They used planning, learning, and action techniques. And did community mapping exercises. Now, this was very interesting because, number one, as this project unfolded, women in the slums really came forward, okay? Originally, it started out with the men leading the project, but as it advanced, the women took charge and they revealed also all the political intricacies as to why there's water inequities, even in the slum level leadership, how the slum level leader is also misusing his power and advancing cronyism and, so that some slum residents had greater access to water while others suffered. All levels of layers of information came out, and the women really took control of this entire process. So that was very remarkable, but also the materials that are used. So chalk was used to draw a map of the community directly on the ground, and then sticks, leaves, and pebbles were used to represent demographic information in the square of the map. So a square represented a house or a unit, and a stick represented a man, a male, a leaf represented a female, and pebbles represented the children, okay? And this level of detailed demographic information was completely absent from any local source. So this is the chalks, pebbles, leaves mapping going on. And here's the evidence. Most of those who are actively participating are women. As the discussions went on, they also negotiated with the problematic leadership instead of direct confrontation, which would have been volatile. They help to monitor and navigate the process to seek solutions. So the knowledge that was created on ground was then mapped into paper. So it was transferred to paper. And then later on, it was mapped in ArcView. It wasn't integrated with any government database because it's not spatially georeferenced, etc. But it was kept for records for the government to address issues. And what was the impact? Well, Delhi Jal Board was also a partner within this project, and basically their engineers for the first time were able to really see what the conditions were and address those. They saw that there were insufficient number of water taps, there were many broken taps, there was insufficient water delivery and drainage systems, and that there was really unequal access to water taps. And the actions is that it resulted in repairs, in construction, in addressing all of these, and more water taps were installed. And it wasn't as if the problem was entirely solved, but it was the inequality was greatly reduced and new opportunities of access were definitely created. So this wouldn't have happened without on-the-ground public participation GIS, which drove towards action, research, and demanded change and accountability from the government. And presented with all of this, it's hard for an agency to just say no. Also, what is interesting is the women took great ownership of this, and they continue to take great ownership of this, and they kept pursuing to see and overseeing that the things are properly addressed. And so there was new leadership that obviously emerged, and for community building, this was also really great because it provided new spaces of opportunity for, again, women in slums. We are talking about a highly patriarchal society, and Delhi is a very patriarchal city and culture, okay? So women would not necessarily be the ones in the forefront at all. And the fact that they really came in and then took charge when they were not in the position to do so, tells you something. So what we have is then really different scenarios of different levels of opportunity. I would say that looking at the level of mapping that's going on, this is very, very promising because the extent of spatial information that is now available at the local level is historically unprecedented, and people have access to it. And there is also this great integration of different sources of data, such as the census, such as the remote satellite images, such as the municipal mapping, and so on. But also the ways, because things have been centralized, in some ways it has worked really well in terms of just raw implementation. And Bhuvan and Bharat Maps and Census of India's mapping, and that's another portal. And when the National Urban Information Systems, these are all quite impressive, and so a lot of good work is done. Ward mapping, though, is very complicated, so the local level mapping is still, it's not all entirely done, so different places are at different stages, but it's ongoing and seems to be strongly addressed. Now, what do you do with that opportunity? I think there has to be strict reform taken in municipal administration, which is highly problematic. And so that's a huge goal, and that has to be addressed. One of the studies showed that in another couple of cities, that a whole bunch of things were done, and the leader in charge of that municipality was very gung-ho about implementing all the changes, and did, and many things happened. And then a few years later, he was transferred because he was rocking the boat. And then the new one who came in charge pretty much abandoned all the initiatives. And this included a whole bunch of the ideas of JNNURM project. So the problem is that when that happened, there was no accountability, right? Again, citizens lacked the power. Further, under his administration, the city workers could get away with not responding. So most of these jobs seem to be lifetime jobs with complete guarantee of job security, and there's no action taken. So unless there is some level, if you're going to do public-private partnership and make it more efficient, you have to address those levels of accountability. So that's my 2 cents. I think I stayed within time, and open it up to questions.
Thank you for that presentation. It's really informative. So much happening. Could you talk a little bit about the role of education and maybe university within helping to facilitate participatory processes, mapping, and GIS in cities? Is that happening?
Yes, in fact, in some of these studies, the universities were involved and participated in it and helped build the students who were active in the spatial knowledge construction, particularly from like departments of planning and architecture, those kinds of partnerships happened. So yes, there are some interesting challenges, which is that the community level administration, the political leaders are very unfamiliar with all these maps and technologies, and so they had to get familiarized. I think once they understood, in one of the examples, once they understood it, they got on board. But that's what I mean about the local cultures and getting used to the maps. I mean, another thing that I really, since I have a little bit of time, I want to bring up is that the planimetric perspective of your neighborhood. This is something we respond to, but common citizens don't, whether in U.S. or whether in India, and certainly if they have been unused to having a daily map reading culture. There was no daily map reading culture, and I was a geographer. I used so many maps and topo maps and so on, but local maps, none. So there is a whole level of visualizing your city in this map format, and then looking at your ward boundaries and things in a map. That's a whole level of learning curve, even for educated people. So that's also something that all these works should be attentive to, and people's ease. And the language issues are really important because, interestingly, all the GIS activities in India are all happening in English. But the majority of India are not English speakers. So it is, there is an entrenched inequality right there, okay? And the mapping, it's not just urban, it's all rural areas are being addressed and so on. So it's even, in rural areas, people speak even less English and reading and so on, and there's issues of illiteracy. So it's interesting that, and I've interviewed and I see folks and things like that, but the issue of languages have never been brought up, okay? So why are these things glossed over? Clearly, languages were an important aspect when the thematic mapping initiative was done, when the program was implemented post-independence. Okay, so all these vernacular thematic maps were built. The same should be done for this municipal mapping, local level mapping, detail mapping. Language should be addressed.
Thank you. That was a great talk. And I have a question. Does India have a national spatial data infrastructure, and does it extend at the scale that you have been working at, or does the standards still need to be developed at very local scales to fit in with the NSDI? It's
developed an NSDI. Everything has been undertaken through national framework. But it's approached all of these policies and so on and laid it out from the national level, including what should happen at the local level. Policy-wise, policies have been implemented, and the process, the national GIS project itself is the goal, that you make it highly efficient and mapped and address all the policy issues. So that's a big aim of the government. In fact, ESRI did a huge spread on this, and India's national GIS program is quite extraordinary with the Ghose. And it really incorporates mapping with decision making. So, if
The follow-up question then, I know one of the problems in India is budgets are very inflexible. Is there budgetary support for the development of local SDI, for development of local SDIs from the national level, or does it have to be generated locally?
No, it's I would say in India, all of this actually made me quite envious, because we have far more budgetary issues in the US, I feel. Here, since this is all a national driver, budgets have been all allocated, which is why the JNN URM project could be implemented at local levels easily, because the budget came straight from the national level. So it's national to local level budgeting constantly.
Thank you.